My name is Kevin Hazelwood. I'm the Senior Vice President with Cactus FEEDERS, currently in a role of Chief of Staff. I want to thank you for inviting us to this seminar. We don't often get an opportunity to present kind of a boots-on-the-ground view of production agriculture, and so we're very pleased to be here. I'd like to start off with just a little bit of a way of introduction for those of you that haven't been to a feed yard or are unaware of what the feeding segment is. We exist in the final finishing phase of beef cattle production. What we see right here is one of our locations in the namesake town of Cactus, Texas, stuck up in the northern Texas Panhandle. We operate 10 of these locations throughout the Texas Panhandle into southwest Kansas. We would finish just over 1 million head of animals a year. This lot would hold 75,000. There's a few things I want you to notice. In the foreground, you can see the pen. All of our animals are kept in open-air corrals. They have about 175 square feet of space per animal, much more than we're enjoying right now in this room. In the background, you can see that white building is a feed mill. We produce all of our own fresh feed. This location would produce 2 million pounds of fresh feed every day, and we feed our animals 3 times a day. We are a good corporate steward and a good corporate citizen. Our company is 100% employee-owned. That means the 500 employees that work for Cactus FEEDERS own 100% of the company itself. And so we practice what we would call fair pay and family benefits. That means that our employees have wages at roughly twice the minimum wage. They enjoy 100% paid retirement, and we pay over 90% of the health care premiums for them. Let me start with a few of the challenges that we face in the feed yard segment. Again, we'll bring these animals in at the finishing phase. So they'll come in anywhere from 400 to 800 pounds. They'll stay with us for 4 to 6 months, gaining 3 to 4 pounds a day. Part of our challenge is we have a large disparate herd. So in that 75,000 head feed yard, for example, we would bring in between 1,500 and 2,000 animals each and every week. We do practice an all-in, all-out at the pen level. But that means even in the pen level, even in the lot level, the animals that you see here would have a wide variation in terms of their origin, their health status, their herd health and immunities. And so the challenge is assimilating a large disparate herd and yet also applying a level of individual care to those animals. 90% of the animals that enter our facilities will never see a medical treatment. And only 1 to 1.5% of our total population will experience mortality. It begins with guys like Mike Barnes, who you see here riding a horse. Although we have a large disparate herd, we have to apply individual care at the animal level. And so every one of our animals in every one of our yards is ridden daily by a pen rider here horseback, and they physically observe each of the animals. Any animal then that's requiring care, treatment or care is pulled and taken to our hospital programs. However, our antibiotic stewardship really begins with animal handling and pharmaceutical care. Our philosophy here is that we don't want the animals to get to the hospital. 90% of our animals never see a hospital, never experience a treatment. That begins with animal handling and care. And what you see here on the left side of the screen is our receiving facilities and our doctoring barns. In our receiving program, we focus on low-stress animal handling. We know a lot of times our animals are coming from large backgrounds in terms of geography, in terms of climate, in terms of travel. That represents a certain amount of stress to our animals, and so we want to do 2 things when we receive them. One is we want to practice low-stress animal handling. The second is we want to give a vaccination program, and that requires a considerable amount of investment in facilities and in our people, in our training, and in our barns. The other place antibiotic stewardship begins for us will be on the right side of your slide. And what you see there is essentially a pharmacy within a feed yard. This is a Quebec system that our technology partners over at Micro Technologies developed. Think of this as a off-premise, or I should say a separate building where our pharmaceuticals are housed. It's a secured building with a keypad, so as the employees who are authorized to use pharmaceuticals in our facilities, as they enter this facility, the lights automatically come on, a camera automatically starts so we can record the presence of that employee, and then in order to check out pharmaceuticals from the pharmacy, he's required to log on to the computer, which uses a thumbprint security system. Not only can I ensure then that those are secured pharmaceuticals, but they're also climate controlled, and my inventory, as I pull from inventory, can be tracked and balanced back against my treatment usage. So we really believe that the overarching philosophy in antibiotic stewardship begins with, 1, let's make sure they don't get to the hospital, and 2, if they do, let's make sure that the pharmaceuticals are taken care of and administered in a way that they're effective. So a few of our specific antibiotic stewardship issues. And again, our philosophy around the use of antibiotics is, you'll hear me say, necessary and judicious. We want to use as much antibiotics as is necessary to treat a specific disease or illness, but we want to use as little as possible in order to affect that. The first thing we'd say is that we use no medically important antibiotics for growth promotion use. Also, all of the Cactus feed yards are BQA certified. Not just the facility being BQA certified, but every employee in our employment that is dealing with the animal handling, animal care, animal treatment, application of antibiotics or other medical treatments are individually certified on an annual basis through the Beef Quality Assurance Program. We also require diagnosis for any antibiotic treatment, and then only for pneumonia or infective injury. And I would point out here, although it's not on the slide, that we exercise no extra label use whatsoever. This is done under the supervision of our in-house veterinarian, Dr. Carter King, who's in the audience today, would oversee these programs and the implementation across all 10 of our feed yards. We have a respiratory observe program. Many times when an animal is presented to our doctors, to our employees in the animal hospital, many times they'll be stressed, many times they can hide an illness. The doctor, although he has a preliminary indication of respiratory disease, the doctor has the flexibility of segregating that animal with feed and water with no treatment for 24 hours in order to observe, in his opinion, what the continuing treatment needs to be. What we find is that although these represent 15% of our total pulls, only 5% of those animals are subsequently treated. They're temped, they're observed, and then a secondary diagnosis is made. And thus we have the ability to narrow the path within which antibiotics are used. The data would show that then a resulting mortality is only 1% of those animals. We think it's an important flexibility that we don't simply use antibiotics across every diagnosis, but we take the extra time to confirm. We already talked about the QBEC system. Again, think of a secure, computerized pharmacy in a feed yard. All of our treated animals at the hospital level are individually identified and tracked. So they would receive individual identification number through the use of 2 ear tags. They would then be entered into our computer where we would track not only the diagnosis, the treatment protocol, the dosage. We would also track the withdrawal times on the individual animals. Additionally, we practice what we call residue prohibition. We have a quality assurance officer, Mr. Troy Keller, who reports to Dr. Carter King. And so the first thing we need to understand is we have a reporting relationship which is outside of administration and production. Right? That keeps our independence, which is important to us. Because what the QA officer does is he certifies each lot of animals as being safe to ship. Thus, he tracks the individual treatment records against the lot level shipment records to make sure that those animals have withdrawn safely, and only then are they allowed to leave the facility. We also have quite a commitment to research. We have a 40,000 head feed yard near Tulia, Texas, and our research facility is housed within that. Part of our research trials with our production partners, with our packing house partners, and with some of our retail partners is we have been currently working on the replacement of Tylen in the feed. Many of those revolve around roughage replacement, but we also have alternative therapies that we're looking at. Another area of research that we've been interested in for quite a while is advanced diagnosis. One of the downsides of the effectiveness of our broad-spectrum antibiotics is that they have, let's say, disincentivized a real understanding and a real diagnosis, advanced diagnosis of the illnesses and diseases that we face. An example of one of the things we're working with is an electronic stethoscope. So again, just like our respiratory observe program, we want to narrow the path within which those antibiotics are used at the appropriate time and in the appropriate manner. I'd like to move on to a few of our challenges. Most of these challenges that we'll put up here, near term and long term, will revolve around what we view as, potentially view as a threat to push our antibiotic use in the industry below what we would consider to be a necessary and judicious use. The first near-term fear that we have would be a loss of our control label. Control label is primarily used in the prevention of BRD in our newly arrived cattle. These would be lightweight animals that are somewhat travel stressed. They may be stressed from a herd health standpoint, maybe a climate stress, but as they enter the yard, we can see they have a predisposition for BRD. This would represent 1 to 2% of our entire population. Use of that control label then for the prevention of BRD is an important tool as we move forward in the production process. And I should state right now, it's more than just an economic tool. We're cattlemen. This is what we do for a living. Guys like Mike Barnes take it very personally when they get up in the morning and the animals underneath their care are diseased or injured or ill. And so our obligation to the company is more than just an economic obligation. I think all of our employees have an obligation to the individual animal themselves. And so the idea that we would have a tool at our disposal that we couldn't use when we know animals might become ill or injured is an important one for us. I was especially encouraged by Dr. Flynn's comments yesterday regarding the judicious use of prevention medications. The second concern that we have is what we term a paradox of demand. Most all of us in the room would understand that antibiotics have a certain resistance curve over time. However, I'm not certain that the consumers that are using our product have that same understanding. Amen? And so as the consumers begin to try and lengthen that resistance curve, as they begin to apply pressure on the industry where our antibiotic use would be below what we consider to be necessary and judicious, we get into a paradox of demand, whereby the very engine that runs the innovation and the growth of new products is dampened or hampered because the industry itself does not experience a volume of demand that will support it. And so while it may be tempting from an industry standpoint to respond to the fears of our consumers, unfortunately when we manage these problems out of our consumers' fear, we get exactly what we fear most, which is the inability to respond to the challenges that we have when the inevitable resistance does occur. Corresponding to that, we must ask the question, because our beef markets are highly transparent and because we experience price discovery at the retail level each and every day, in some cases each and every hour, if our industry is exposed or threatened with use of antibiotics that is pushed down below what we consider to be necessary and judicious use, then we're simply exporting our animal productivity to other beef-producing countries who may not have the same standards or stringency around their antibiotic use. And so as I export my value at the animal productivity level, then I'm in a position of not being able to compete in those international markets. Consequently, that product will be imported back into our country at a lower cost than what we can produce it for. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are we actually importing? And what have we actually affected in terms of a resistance curve? If we're importing exposures from foreign countries to bacterias or residues or resistance, have we really done anything to impact the overall resistance curve that we're trying to influence? And the last point here, I know the folks from Tyson and Cargill made a few comments along these lines. We would echo those. There does seem to be a certain consumer anti-technology attitude that we're facing in the industry. And we need to understand that as we encounter that anti-technology, it directly affects our ability to produce beef in a sustainable fashion. Over the last 20 years, we've been able to produce the same pounds per head, but we do that using 2,000 pounds per head fewer feed and 1,250 gallons of water per head. And so any of threats to our production technologies, including necessary antibiotic use, would put us back on the order of several decades in terms of our ability to sustain the sustainable production of beef.